Future wife. I hid my pain so I could protect your smile, my love. There are some battles and fights in complete silence. Battles no one sees, wounds no one notices. Nights filled with thoughts he never speaks about, not because he is strong all the time, but because there is someone he loves more than his own pain. And that someone's is you. Before you came into my life, I learned how to carry heavy burdens alone. I learned how to smile when my heart was hurting. I learned how to stand when everything inside me wanted to fall apart. But when I met you, something changed. Your happiness became more important than my struggles. Your smile became more precious than my comfort. So there were days when I hid my pain behind a gentle smile. Days when I carried worries you never knew about. Days when I chose silence, not because I didn't trust you, but because I never wanted my storms to darken your sunshine. Future wife, if you're listening today, I want you to know something from the deepest spirit part of my heart. Every sacrifice was made out of love. Every silent tear was hidden out of love. Every difficult moment I endured alone was because seeing you happy made every burden feel lighter. This is the story of a man who loved so deeply that he chose to carry the pain himself, just to protect the smile of the woman he hopes to spend forever with. My future wife, there is something I have carried in my heart for a very long time, something I have never fully put into words. One day, when life brings us together and our paths become one, I hope you understand that not every smile you saw on my face was a reflection of peace inside me. There were days when I smiled while carrying a weight no one could see. There were nights when I looked calm on the outside while fighting battles within myself. There were moments when my heart was exhausted, yet I continued moving forward. Because the thought of your happiness gave me a reason to keep going. Long before you knew my name, I was learning how to survive difficult seasons. I was learning how to stand alone in moments when life felt unfair. I was learning how to carry disappointments without allowing them to change the kindness in my heart. The world often teaches people to hide their struggles, and somewhere along the way, I became very good at it. I learned how to laugh when I was hurting. I learned how to encourage others while needing encouragement myself. I learned how to be strong for everyone around me. Even during the moments when I felt weak, then the thought of you entered my life. Even before I met you, I imagined the woman I would one day call my wife. I imagined her smile. I imagined her dreams. I imagined the way she would look at the world with hope in her eyes. And whenever life became difficult, I found myself making a silent promise. I promised that whoever she was, wherever she was, I would do everything in my power to protect her happiness. That promise changed the way I carried my pain. There were moments when I could have spoken about my struggles. There were times when I could have allowed my sadness to take control of my actions. There were days when I wanted someone to understand how tired I was, but instead of allowing my pain to become a burden on the people I loved, I carried it quietly. Not because I enjoyed suffering in silence, but because love was teaching me a different kind of strength. Love taught me that sometimes protecting someone does not mean standing in front of danger. Sometimes it means standing between them and the storms they never even know existed. Future wife, there were nights when I stayed awake worrying about things I never mentioned. I worried about the future. I worried about making the right choices. I worried about becoming the man you would deserve. While others slept peacefully, I was often having conversations with myself, asking whether I was doing enough, whether I was growing enough, whether I was becoming strong enough to build a life filled with safety, peace, and love. I never wanted to offer you half of my heart. I never wanted to bring you a life built on excuses. I wanted to become a man who could look into your eyes and that he gave everything he had to create a future where you could feel secure, valued, and loved. That journey required sacrifices. There were moments when nobody saw what was happening behind the scenes. Nobody saw the disappointments I kept hidden. Nobody saw the tears I refused to let fall in front of others. Nobody saw the fears I carried when life became uncertain. I carried those things quietly, because I never wanted negativity to become stronger than my hope. And whenever I imagined your smile, something inside me became stronger. Your smile became more than a beautiful image in my mind. It became a reminder that some things are worth fighting for. It reminded me that love is not only about receiving happiness. Love is also about creating happiness. Love is choosing to become better because someone else's joy matters to you. There were times when life tested me in ways I never expected. Times when doors closed after I had worked hard to open them. Times when people misunderstood me. Times when I gave my best, and still watched things fall apart. Those experiences left scars. Some scars healed quickly. Others remained hidden deep inside my heart. But whenever I thought about the woman I would one day spend my life with, I refused to allow bitterness to take root inside me. I wanted you to meet a man who still believed in kindness. I wanted you to meet a man who still believed in loyalty. I wanted you to meet a man who still believed in love. That is why I protected my heart. Even while it was hurting. Many people think strength means never feeling pain. I learned that true strength is feeling pain and still choosing love. True strength is carrying disappointment without becoming cruel. True strength is facing loneliness without losing compassion. True strength is walking through darkness while keeping a light alive for someone else. Future wife. There were moments when I smiled for you, before you were even standing beside me. There were moments when I kept going, because I imagined a future, where we would sit together, and talk about everything we survived. I imagined sharing peaceful mornings with you. I imagined hearing your laughter after a difficult day. I imagined holding your hand, and realizing that every struggle had led me to that moment. Those dreams helped me endure things I never spoke about. Sometimes I looked perfectly fine while carrying 1,000 thoughts inside my head. Sometimes I answered questions with a simple smile, because explaining everything would have taken hours. Sometimes I chose silence because I knew that not every battle needed an audience. The truth is that some of my hardest fights happened within myself. I fought against fear. I fought against doubt. I fought against insecurity. I fought against the voice that sometimes whispered that I was not enough. And every time I won one of those battles, I became a little stronger for you. Not perfect, not fearless, not invincible. Just stronger, because I wanted the version of me that eventually met you to be wiser than the version that started this journey. I wanted to bring you peace instead of chaos. I wanted to bring you comfort instead of confusion. I wanted to bring you honesty instead of empty promises. There were days when I wished someone would ask me if I was okay, and genuinely wait for the answer. There were days when I wished someone could see beyond the smile and recognize the weight I was carrying. Yet even during those moments, I reminded myself that life was shaping me. Every challenge was teaching me patience. Every disappointment was teaching me resilience. Every heartbreak was teaching me how valuable genuine love truly is, and because of those lessons, my appreciation for you continued to grow, even before we met. I imagined the little things. I imagined hearing your voice after a long day. I imagined watching you smile at something simple. I imagined the comfort of knowing that no matter how difficult the world became, we would face it together. Those thoughts became a source of strength. When people looked at me, they often saw calmness, they saw patience, they saw determination. What they did not always see were the sacrifices behind those qualities. They did not see the countless moments when giving up would have been easier. They did not see the emotional battles that took place behind closed doors. But you deserve to know. You deserve to know that if I ever seem strong, it is because life gave me reasons to become strong. If I ever seem patient, it is because life taught me how to wait. If I ever seem loving, it is because I understand how precious genuine love really is. Future wife, one day you may ask me why I rarely talked about certain struggles. You may wonder why I carried so much by myself. The answer is simple, because your smile mattered to me. Not in a way that ignored my own feelings. Not in a way that pretended everything was perfect, but in a way that reminded me what was truly important. Your happiness became a light I wanted to protect. Your future, something I wanted to contribute to. Your dreams became something I wanted to support. There is a special kind of love that quietly chooses sacrifice without asking for recognition. It does not keep score, it does not demand applause, it simply gives because giving feels natural. That is the kind of love I felt whenever I thought about you. I never needed the world to know how much I struggled. I never needed everyone to understand my sacrifices. I only hoped that one day you would understand that behind every effort was a heart trying its best to create something beautiful for the woman it loved. Every difficult day became another reason to appreciate the future. Every painful lesson became another piece of wisdom. Every obstacle became another opportunity to grow. And through it all, the image of your smile remained one of the most powerful motivations in my life. Because when a man truly loves, he does not only think about what he can receive, he thinks about what he can give, he thinks about how he can protect, he thinks about how he can encourage, he thinks about how he can become someone worthy of the trust placed in his hands. That is why I carried certain pains quietly, that is why I faced certain storms alone. That is why I continued walking forward even when the road felt endless. Because, somewhere in my heart, I believed that every step was bringing me closer to you, future wife. There is something I hope you never forget when you look back at our story. Before we shared conversations, before we created memories together, before our hands found each other, and our hearts learned the comfort of belonging, there were sacrifices being made that you never saw. There were decisions, struggles, and quiet moments of endurance that happened long before we met. At the time, I didn't know your name. I didn't know where you were, I didn't know what your voice sounded like. But somehow, deep in my heart, I was already preparing a place for you. People often think love begins the moment two people meet. I see it differently. Sometimes love begins long before the introduction. Sometimes love begins in the choices we make when nobody is watching. It begins in the discipline we practice during lonely seasons. It begins in the lessons we learn through heartbreak, disappointment, and hardship. It begins when we decide not to allow pain to make us bitter. It begins when we choose growth, instead of resentment. There were many moments in my life when taking the easier path would have been tempting. There were times when I could have allowed frustration to change me. I could have become cold, I could have stopped believing in people. I could have stopped believing in love. Yet every time life gave me a reason to close my heart, something inside me refused. Somewhere deep within, I believed there was a woman I would one day meet who deserved the best version of me, not the most wounded version of me, so I kept working on myself. I kept learning, I kept growing, I kept healing, not because it was easy, but because I wanted to become someone capable of loving deeply without fear. I wanted to become someone who could stand beside you, with honesty, strength, and loyalty. Every difficult lesson became part of that preparation. There were nights when exhaustion sat heavily on my shoulders. Nights when the future felt uncertain. Nights when I questioned whether all the effort was worth it. During those moments, I often imagined the life I hoped to build one day. I imagined a home filled with peace. I imagined conversations that lasted for hours, because neither of us wanted them to end. I imagined laughter filling ordinary days. I imagined looking across a room, and finding comfort, simply because you were there. Those dreams kept me moving forward. Every silent sacrifice carried a purpose. When I worked harder than anyone expected, it was because I wanted to build stability. When I remained patient during difficult seasons, it was because I wanted to learn emotional strength. When I chose integrity, even when nobody would have noticed otherwise, it was because I wanted to become a man you could trust completely. Many people only see the results of sacrifice. They see the confidence, the wisdom, or the success that comes later. What they don't see are the moments that created those things. They don't see the tears hidden behind determination. Disappointments that taught resilience. They don't see the loneliness that taught gratitude. Future wife, there were chapters of my life that tested me more than I can explain. Chapters where I felt misunderstood. Chapters where I carried burdens that seemed too heavy. Chapters where I wondered why certain struggles were happening at all. Yet looking back, I can see that every challenge was shaping something within me. Every setback taught me patience. Every heartbreak taught me compassion. Every failure taught me humility. Every delay taught me faith. Without those lessons, I would not be the man writing these words to you today. The truth is that some sacrifices never receive recognition. Some sacrifices happen quietly in the background. They happen when a person chooses responsibility over comfort. They happen when a person keeps moving despite exhaustion. They happen when someone refuses to give up on their values. Even when life becomes difficult, those were the sacrifices I made, not because I expected applause, not because I wanted sympathy, but because love, even before meeting you, inspired me to become better. I wanted to offer you more than promises. I wanted to offer you consistency. I wanted to offer you loyalty. I wanted to offer you peace. I wanted to offer you a heart that had been tested by life, but had not lost its ability to love. There were times when nobody knew how hard I was trying. Nobody knew the pressure I felt. Nobody knew the fears I faced. Yet every morning I got up and continued moving forward. I continued believing that the difficult season I was walking through would one day become part of a beautiful story. A story that would eventually include you. And because of that belief, I treated every sacrifice as an investment in our future. Every lesson I learned would someday help me understand you better. Every hardship I survived would someday help me support you better. Every piece of wisdom I gained would someday help me protect the life we were building together. I often think about how different life would be if I had allowed pain to define me. If I had allowed disappointment to harden my heart, I might have become someone incapable of appreciating the gift of real love. But every time life tried to convince me to give up, I chose hope instead. Hope that somewhere in this world, you existed. Hope that one day our paths would cross. Hope that every sacrifice would make sense when I finally looked into your eyes and realized why I had endured so much. Because some forms of love begin with preparation, they begin with unseen effort. They begin with silent sacrifices. They begin with a person choosing growth when nobody is watching. And, if there is one thing I want you to understand, future wife, it is this. Every difficult step, every lonely season, every hidden struggle, and every silent sacrifice became part of the journey that prepared my heart to love you with greater patience, greater strength, and greater devotion than I ever thought possible.